So in this class, we'll be learning more on thermodynamics, that is the second law of thermodynamics. Before we get into the second law of thermodynamics, what we have learned in the previous topic, that is first law of thermodynamics, just look into that particular aspect once. There we have learned the first law of thermodynamics. In fact, zeroth law of thermodynamics also we have learned. Then we came across something called as limitations of first law of thermodynamics. What it does, what it says, it does not tell you in which direction the energy flows. The first law simply says energy can transfer, but in which direction it doesn't tell you in which direction the energy actually flows. In practice, we know that it is from a higher energy level to a lower energy level. If you consider the statement of first law of thermodynamics, you can also say that from lower level to higher level it is possible to flow. It just flows. Okay, so that's the disadvantage, or instead of saying disadvantage, in which direction the energy flows, it cannot be explained using the concept of first law of thermodynamics. In similar way, there is no difference between Q and W when you consider first law of thermodynamics. Q and W means you supply some amount of heat, an equal amount of work is done. That means efficiency is 100%. It is impossible. Some amount of heat is lost in the process. That is not explained by the first law of thermodynamics. If you look at the closed system, we have derived equation delta U is equal to Q minus W. If you remember, for an isothermal process, Q is equal to W, right? So in the first law of thermodynamics, you can prove that Q is equal to W. But actually, even under isothermal case, that does not happen. In reality, W will be lesser than Q. Alright? So this particular difference, qualitative difference, what we see, is not explained by the first law of thermodynamics. Because of that, there is a necessity to develop a law, a statement, a set of statements called as second law of thermodynamics. So these two limitations leads to second law of thermodynamics. When I say these two statement leads, these two particular concepts which are unable to be explained by first law of thermodynamics should be explained by the second law of thermodynamics. Means they are the part and parcel of second law of thermodynamics. So you should be able to identify now what could be there in the statement. You can anticipate it. There is a direction of change. There is a mention of direction of change. There is a mention of qualitative difference in the statement of second law of thermodynamics. Right? Also, we are going to see their equivalence. We are going to see the second law in another point of view called as entropy. In terms of entropy, not the energy. In terms of entropy, we are going to visualize it. So before we get into the second law of thermodynamics in detail, we'll see first entropy. We have seen the different, in the previous class, we have seen the different statements, right? So we have seen the statements. There are 5 statements which are given to you. In that, mainly what I have told you is Clausius statement, another one is Kelvin-Planck statement. Those two are equivalent. When we were mentioning that those two statements, we were mentioning about the direction of change. Also, we were mentioning about the heat engine and heat pump. So, we are coming across some losses of energy. Some extra energy is required to pump. Some amount of energy is lost to the surrounding in the case of engine. Right? Whether you take engine or a pump, Q is not equal to W. That's what you have seen there. Same thing, same concept can be explained in a different way using entropy. This is an alternative, equivalent way of explaining second law of thermodynamics. So this is a word coined by a group of scientists, mainly Clausius, Carnot and Clausius, right? So there were certain concepts that were developed, and this word is coined. Please note, energy and entropy are two different things. Energy is the ability to do work. You can define it in the simplest way. Okay, it should be able to do work. The system should be able to do work given input energy. So all forms of energy are not fully interconvertible. This is the concept of non-equivalence. Q not equal to W. Okay, so these two are the basic background behind the second law of thermodynamics. Now, how do we explain this? Although all forms of energy are interconvertible and all can be used to do the work, it is not always possible, even in principle, means in reality, to convert the entire available energy into the work. Now the question arises when you say this, the concept is simple here. I'm giving 100 joule energy. I can expect, say, 80 joule of energy as the work done, I can get it. We say that as an example. The 20 joule is unable to be converted to work, that is lost to the surrounding. That is in reality, that is what is happening, and that is according to the second law of thermodynamics. What happens to that 20 joule, that missing 20 joule? It is going to the surrounding. What is happening there? That is explained by entropy. Entropy is a measure of how much energy is not available to do the work, right? So I gave 100 joule energy to my system. It did a work of 80 joule. 20 joule is lost to the surrounding permanently. It is an irreversible loss. Okay, so you cannot get that energy back. It is a physical phenomena, a natural phenomena which is just happening. You don't have a particular reason for it. Okay, now to mention that it is in that particular direction, it is not available, we use a term called as entropy. Now, because the reason is you are saying that it is impossible to get that back, it is irreversible, right? So how much it is, we need it in a quantitative way to explain that. Entropy is a quantitative way explaining that irreversible loss of energy which usually is lost to the surrounding. Okay, so that unavailable energy is of interest in thermodynamics. The reason is all our system, we want to be highly efficient. You know that, right? So we want all our working system to be highly efficient to do a perfect work. So whatever we design, develop, should be able to work at its best. In other words, it should be ideally 100% efficient. In reality, it doesn't happen. Some amount is lost. Why does it lost? Where does it lost? Can you minimize that loss? The question arises is, can you minimize that loss? Now, if thermodynamics says it is inevitable for the system to lose 20 joule of energy, means 80 joule of energy work can be done. Out of 100 joule I fed, only 100 joule I can get as the output. 20 joule is inevitable. There will be loss of 20 joule. If I make a mention with the standpoint of thermodynamics, that is the ultimate amount you can do. That means 20 joule it has to be lost. You cannot get it back. Whatever may be your system, how much ever you improvise it, that is the end point. You cannot go beyond that. So the point here is thermodynamics sets a limit for your system, a theoretical limit for your system, which in turn says you cannot go ahead. This is the end point for your system. Okay, so that's the key idea behind usage of thermodynamic concepts. If thermodynamics says this is the end point and limit, that's the end point. You cannot go ahead. Remember, theoretical values it will be given there. It will be output give you as the results, right? So these are all theoretical. Practical values will be further lesser than the theoretical values. So theoretically, if I say 20 joule is loss, you will get 80 joule of work can be done. My efficiency is 80%, right? Output is 80 joule, input is 100 joule. 20 joule is lost. So my efficiency of the theoretical system is 80%. That's theoretical. In reality, I cannot construct a system which is beyond that 80%. In reality, my actual system will be lesser than 80%. Maybe 70, maybe 60, maybe 50. Let me say that I have developed a system with an efficiency of 50%. Theoretically, if you do the calculation according to the thermodynamics, it says 80%. Means there is a scope for improvement. Means I have 50%, I can jump up to 80%. For that, I had to do some modification in my design, right? Now I'll think of doing all those modifications. I'll think of doing those modifications so that my efficiency increases up to 80%. If my efficiency is somewhere about 75, 76 or 77, let me say, not 80, nearer to 80. And your theoretical value says, thermodynamics says 80% is the upper limit, then there is no use in breaking my head to increase that from 75 to 80, because I will have to spend a lot of money to improvise, which is just a waste. Just a 5% increase I can get. Okay, I can just change over the system. Is that clear? So that's the standpoint of having a thermodynamic concept in a realistic designs. So the entropy comes into picture in these particular concepts. Let us see a little more in detail. Now, I said entropy is a measure of that irreversible loss. How do we measure it? Now there are two types of system. One is called as a reversible system. Another is called as irreversible system. Reversible system in the sense, in the beginning, the first unit only I had made a mention of this. A reversible system is one where you may not require a lot of energy to get back the system back to its original state. Okay, so usually this is the ideal conceptual system only. The way we have ideal gas and real gas, very similar to that, I can explain it to you. This reversible system is something equivalent to an ideal gas. Irreversible system is something equivalent to a realistic gas. Okay, we make an assumption that our real gas behaves similar to real ideal gas. We make an assumption, right? So here also, for a conceptual purpose, we always idealize the system. We have a reversible system. Reversible system means I do not have to give some amount of energy to for that to come back to its original state. Okay. For example, you know about what do you call that? Merry-go-round, right? That merry-go-round wheel, right? What do you call that? Merry-go-round wheel, right? Is there any other name for that? You get it in any other name for that? I hope you understood what I mean. Merry-go-round. That's where you sit and it goes up and down, circle. What do you call that? Yeah, ferry ride, possibly. Yeah, that's also you can call, right? So initially, I am talking about a smaller design. Maybe they take it around, right? In the beginning, they give a push. It goes one circle. Imagine the person doesn't push it further. It comes back to its original state. Then again goes one more circle. Like that, infinitely it should go without a person's intervention, without a person pushing it for the further cycles. That you can call it as reversible. Alright. So irreversible means it stops somewhere. If it has to go for the second cycle, again you have to supply some more amount of energy. Then it goes to the second cycle. Then again some amount of energy, third cycle, right? Rotations. So that way I can explain it to you in a simplest way. Equivalently, this works here, each cycle. Now, entropy, change in entropy. Normally, we don't say entropy absolute, we say change in entropy. So that change in entropy is a ratio between the heat transferred to the temperature of the system. So the quantitative definition of entropy, when you cannot say simply that randomness of a system or a measure of unavailable amount of energy of the system. So you cannot define only that much. You have to define quantitatively along with that. You can say entropy is a measure of system thermal energy, is a measure of randomness or disorderedness of the system, which can be explained or which can be defined quantitatively as follows. What? ds is equal to, look at this, it is equal to and ds greater than, that means it is lesser, right? So ds is greater than dqi by dt and equal to dqr by dt. This is a differential form. D is a differential form. In integrated form, you will write qr by dt, qi by dt, provided q is not a function of temperature. If q is a function of temperature, you may have to write that equation. All right. So that is why the differential equations come into picture here. So it is measure of amount of heat transferred, that is Q. It's a measure of the temperature level at which the heat transfer occurs, temperature, and the nature of the process, whether it is reversible or irreversible. Based on these three things, Q, T, and whether it is reversible or irreversible. Based on that, you have a quantitative relationship. If I make a mention, the system is reversible, given the transfer of heat, amount of heat transferred at a particular temperature, you can find out change in entropy. If I say that at 100 degrees Celsius, okay, it should be Kelvin, okay? It should T is in Kelvin always here, absolute temperature, Kelvin. So let me say 400 Kelvin. At 400 Kelvin, 400 joule of energy is transferred for a reversible system. We say that change in entropy is 400 divided by 400. 400 Kelvin, 400 joule. So that is totals to 1, right? 400 by 400 is 1. 1 joule per Kelvin is the change in entropy. But here in this case, the change in entropy will be greater than 1 joule per Kelvin. Okay, actual value will be more than 1. So that extra more than 1 is actually lost to the surrounding, which is irreversible. So we get to know the minimum value, at least 1 joule per energy, 1 joule per Kelvin is lost. That we can identify. Okay. Now, before we go ahead with the usage of that entropy and other concept, let us look into the Carnot cycle. Okay. So Carnot cycle, it's a PV curve. In the PV curve, we define it. What is this PV curve? Pressure in the y-axis, volume in the x-axis, pressure, volume curve. P for the y-axis, V for the x-axis. Always remember, this is a standard way of defining. So whenever you define a system, a graph, a plot, always the y-axis comes first, x-axis comes next. So if I say PV curve, I mean P should go to the y-axis, V should go to the x-axis. Now let me say that let me consider a reversible process, a cyclic process. Combine it, a reversible cyclic process having 4 steps. Okay, having 4 steps. Step number 1, A to B. Step number 2, B to C. Step number 3, C to D. Step number 4, D to A. Did it come back to the original state? That is a cyclic process. Okay, reversible means without giving an extra amount of energy, I can go back from B to A. A to B I can go, without giving an extra amount of energy, I can go back to A. This is a hypothetical process. In reality, it doesn't happen. That's what I meant by ideal situation. Now, these 4 steps are happening this way. Step 1, A to B, is an isothermal expansion. What do you mean by isothermal? Temperature is constant. Expansion means, look at the axis there, it is volume. It is volume. So expansion means volume should increase. Look at the arrow mark, volume should increase. As I told you earlier once, once Shirisha had asked me the question, I'll just point out at this point here. There are 2 ways. I mean, when I come back to this point, I'll tell you. This is the isothermal expansion, and here it is adiabatic expansion. Okay. So adiabatic means heat is not lost to the surrounding. It is used to increase the temperature. In isothermal case, temperature remains constant. So the temperature here is same as temperature here. Here it is adiabatic expansion, means the gas is expanded. The system is expanded. Okay, volume is increased, but suddenly with the increase in temperature. Look at the shape of this. This is shallow, whereas B to C is steep. So always when you plot the graph, I had made a PV curve, right? One in unit number 2 or somewhere. Okay, when I used ideal gas, I had made a mention of this PV curve. Okay, a full set of PV curves, isothermal, adiabatic, then isobaric, isochoric, different cases I have given you. So isothermal, you look at it, it is shallow, whereas adiabatic, it is steep. Look at the difference. Okay, but looks similar. But there is a steep decrease in adiabatic, slow or shallow decrease in the isothermal case. Alright. Whereas isobaric means constant pressure means horizontal line. Isochoric means vertical line. That's the difference. Right. Now there is a question, can't it be bulge outward? It is concave downward, right? So can't it be convex? Means upward. Okay, you can just follow the arrow key here, like this, bulge upward. Can't it be like that? It cannot be like that. Why? You look at the relationship between pressure and volume. Look at the relationship between pressure and volume. When the temperature is constant, PV is a constant. PV is equal to RT, right? PV is equal to RT. If temperature is constant, isothermal. Isothermal means temperature is constant. PV is equal to RT. So RT is a constant. PV is a constant. P into V is a constant. In other words, P is equal to a constant into V power minus 1. So look at the curve, it's V power minus 1, right? So it's a decay, exponential decay curve. Similarly, for an adiabatic case, it is PV power gamma is equal to constant. So P is equal to a constant into V power minus gamma. So again a decay curve. Okay, if it was positive, the power of V, if it was positive, it would have been a bulge. Since it is a negative power for V, pressure into V, pressure V, PV relationship, if you look at for isothermal and adiabatic, V power is negative in both the cases. So that is why it is a convex downward, I mean a concave downwards, okay? So it's not a bulge curve. Yeah, let me come back to this. Isothermal expansion A to B, B to C it is adiabatic expansion, and again C to D it is compression. Compression means volume decreases. It has to come back to this position, right? So it is a forward journey. A to C is a forward journey, and backward it has to come to A now. It has to follow a similar path. So it is first isothermal compression, then adiabatic compression. Remember this one, there are two isothermal processes, there are two adiabatic processes. There are two expansion processes, there are two compression processes, right? Isothermal means constant temperature. At that constant temperature, it can absorb the heat. So it will absorb the heat here, reject the heat here. Reverse process, reject the heat to the surrounding. When it does expansion, the temperature increases, whereas compression, it may decrease, right? It will come back to its original state. In terms of TS curve, temperature entropy curve, the same explanation can be given for temperature versus entropy. Remember, entropy is a function of temperature. Now, as I shown you earlier, Q by T, right? Q by T is entropy. Now, temperature was the 4 cycles, that is step 1 to 2, that is A to B. A to B, isothermal means temperature in y-axis, right? Constant temperature. Temperature here and temperature here are equal. So it should be a horizontal line. But entropy increases because temperature is constant, right? Q by T. And here in the second step, B to C, there is no heat loss. Q is equal to 0 in the case of adiabatic. So Q by T, entropy is 0. Change in entropy is 0. Change in entropy is 0. That means entropy remains same, but temperature decreases in this case. Now isothermal compression, again temperature changes and your entropy also decreases. Change in entropy you can see here. Again it will come back to its normal place, right? So it is a square pattern or TS curve of a Carnot cycle. Please note, Carnot cycle is an ideal cycle, hypothetical cycle. What is the use of this? Let us go ahead and see. In terms of a piston cylinder assembly, for an isothermal expansion, from the surrounding, Q amount of energy is absorbed. Okay, this is the step 1. Then because of that, it will expand up to here, isothermal expansion. From this position to this position, it will expand. Then it will expand suddenly, adiabatically, means there is no absorption of heat in the step 2. It suddenly expands, that is adiabatic expansion, volume increases. Then isothermal compression, it will compress downward up to certain point here. While doing that, it will lose some amount of energy. Q is lost to the surrounding. Okay. Then it will come back to its normal position adiabatically. At that point of time, the temperature of the system comes back to its original state and no heat is lost to the surrounding or no heat is absorbed from the surrounding. This is what happens in the process. Okay, these 4 are representation of these 4 points or the path, in other words. Okay, now based on this concept of Carnot cycle, Nicholas Sadi Carnot, who is the backbone of second law of thermodynamics, developed based on his cycle, the cycle what you have mentioned. Okay, so it is the concept here, it is applicable for only those cycles. He has put forward something called as Carnot's principle. There are 2 propositions in it. There are 2 propositions. When I say Carnot's principle, both are part and parcel of it. So proposition number 1 reads like this. Then again I'll read second set. Then I'll come back to what it means. No heat engine. Look at this. It is a heat engine. And look at the negative word here. No. There is no such thing. That's the meaning. No heat engine operating in a cycle. Please note this. This is always common thing. Cyclic process. We are always talking about a cyclic process here between 2 constant temperature reservoirs. So there should be 2 constant reservoirs, right? So because when I say heat engine, there is one HTR, there is one LTR, high temperature reservoir, low temperature reservoir. Okay, let me read it again. No heat engine operating in a cycle between two constant temperature reservoirs can be more efficient than a reversible engine working between the same two reservoirs. So it is impossible to construct any heat engine. It is impossible to construct any heat engine which has a efficiency greater than a reversible engine. Instead of reversible engine, I can simply say Carnot engine. Carnot engine is a reversible engine. Okay, then a Carnot engine working between the same two reservoirs. It should be same two reservoirs, not others. Okay. Now, second proposition slightly different now. All reversible engine, not negative. Here it is no heat engine mentioned. Here it is all reversible engine working between two constant temperature reservoirs. It looks very similar. Okay. Constant temperature reservoirs have the same efficiency. All reversible engine have the same efficiency irrespective of working substance. What is the fluid inside? Whether it is water, whether it is any liquid, other liquid, glycerol, right, or any ideal gas, nitrogen, oxygen, doesn't matter. Irrespective of the working substance, this efficiency is dependent only on the temperature levels, that is of HDR and LTR. What is HDR? What is LTR temperature? Only on that it is dependent. Which one? The efficiency. So, in very simple principle, okay, so we can explain this way. Carnot's principle is related to the efficiency of system. Efficiency of system, and it compares the efficiency of your system with a Carnot's efficiency. So here it is efficiency of a reversible engine. I'll simply replace the word reversible with Carnot engine. Efficiency of a Carnot engine I'll compare with the efficiency of your engine of design, whatever engine you have designed. Okay, so that is an irreversible engine. Let me say it's an irreversible engine. Always Carnot's engine has efficiency higher than the irreversible engine, provided, it's very important, provided both engines are working between the same two reservoirs. Means HDR and LTR are same. What does it mean? We'll see it in the numerical in the next slide. Okay. Before I go to that, what does the second proposition say? The efficiencies are equal if both are reversible engine working between the same two temperature reservoirs. Same two temperature reservoirs if you take it, and two reversible engines if you take it, the efficiencies are same. Eta R dash. R and R dash are two reversible engines working between the same HDR and LTR. And this efficiency, what you mention here, it is a function of temperature only. It is a function of temperature, okay, of two reservoirs. In detail, we'll see this now. Let me take one example here. I have one HDR. Say it is working at 100 degrees Celsius. Let me take one LTR, which is working at 30 degrees Celsius, 100 and 30. In between that, there are three engines working. Between the same temperature reservoirs, there are three engines working. Engine 1, A, engine B, and engine C. Of this, engine A is irreversible heat engine. Okay, let me define it as irreversible heat engine. B and C both are reversible heat engine. Irreversible is A, B and C both are reversible heat engine. Now, since all three are working within the same temperature reservoirs, it is easy for me to compare it. What is the comparison? Three efficiencies, eta A, eta B, eta C. Three efficiencies I have, I'll compare it. What does the comparison give me the result? Efficiency of B is equal to efficiency of C. Which proposition says? That the second proposition of Carnot's principle says this. Efficiency of B and efficiency of C are equal. Okay, because both are reversible working under the same HDR and LTR. Whereas, when you come to the irreversible engine and compare with them, the efficiency of irreversible engine is lesser than the efficiency of these two. Okay, that's according to the Carnot's first principle. Right? So that's the comparison between two different propositions. Based on this, we'll have a numerical now. Before that, let me tell you about Carnot's efficiency, which we'll be using it in the numerical. So the thermal efficiency, thermal efficiency is defined in general for any engine. I hope you remember the diagram. So we have the HTR, we have the LTR between engine works, and it takes up some amount of input, Q1 joules of energy, does W amount of work, W joules of work, and releases Q2 joules of energy to the cold body. This is inevitable. Remember, according to the second law of thermodynamics, Q2 cannot be zero. But according to first law of thermodynamics, Q2 may be zero. Okay, so first law of thermodynamics, limitation of first law of thermodynamics is Q2 can be zero according to first law. That is the limitation. But in reality, it is not zero. That is why we have brought in the second law. Now, the thermal efficiency of this kind of engine, any engine you take, by default, we can define it as output by input, work by Q1, right? W by Q1. By balancing the energy, that is Q1 should be equal to W plus Q2, right? Q1 equals W plus Q2, energy balancing. So in simple, W is equal to Q1 minus Q2, right? W is equal to Q1 minus Q2. Some amount of energy is in, some amount is lost. The difference must have done the work, right? So this is the basic definition of any efficiency of any heat engine, irreversible or reversible. But in the case of Carnot's engine, the Carnot's efficiency defined as eta R. Okay, so efficiency of Carnot's engine, it follows the second Carnot's principle. According to that, eta R is equal to T1 minus T2 by T1. The Q is proportional to its T. Okay, so it is a function of temperature only. If you remember, efficiency is a function of T1 and T2, HTR and LTR. It is always different. There is a derivation in the K.V. Narayanan thermodynamics book, but that derivation I am not doing it. We are taking only the final result. You can go through the derivation if at all you are interested, not as a part of syllabus, as an extra reading. So you can prove that Q1 by T1 is equal to Q2 by T2 according to that. The derivations, right? So T1 minus T2 by T1. Just Q is replaced with the T. Heat is replaced with the temperature, corresponding temperature. So when you come to Carnot's efficiency, higher temperature minus lower temperature divided by higher temperature, right? So if you know this Q1 minus Q2 by Q1, how it has come? This Q replaced with a T. That's your Carnot's efficiency. Any other heat engine, you can use this equation. Whenever you come across Carnot's efficiency, either use this or you use this based on the available information, right? So these are our two equations which we are going to make use of in the following numericals. You may note down the equation. Anyways, I am going to get this again. Yeah, this is another important point here. According to the Carnot first principle, maximum possible efficiency is this one. When you calculate the efficiency of a Carnot engine, that is the maximum possible efficiency of any hypothetical engine. Carnot engine is a hypothetical engine. Beyond that, you cannot have the efficiency, provided they work under the same HTR and LTR. Okay, here is a numerical. I'm quickly going through the numerical as a readable way. So you can copy down it later. The class PDF is available in the Moodle. Already it's available there. You can go through that after the class. So just observe the calculation. It's very simple. Straightforward calculations here. A heat engine operates between a heat source 700 Kelvin and a heat sink 300 Kelvin. The word is heat source and heat sink. But since looking at the temperature levels, values, you can simply say that it is HTR, high temperature reservoir. This is LTR, low temperature reservoir. Right? 700 and 300. What is the maximum efficiency of the engine? Means we have to find out maximum efficiency, means we have to find out the efficiency of Carnot's engine. The reason is that has the maximum possible efficiency working between these two temperature reservoirs. Let's see what it is. Carnot's efficiency, eta, it is given by T1 minus T2 by T1. T1 is always greater than T2. Remember it. Efficiency is never negative. It's always positive. So let me put up the values. 700 minus 300 given in the problem divided by 700, right? 400 to 700 is 57%. So what does it imply? What does it mean now? When you work between this heat reservoir, 700 and 300 Kelvin, when you work between 700 and 300 Kelvin thermal reservoir, you cannot construct any heat engine operating in cycle, okay, cyclically operating and having an efficiency greater than 57%. So this sets the limit for your engine or your process. Engine is a generic name. Engine can be replaced with the word process also. Okay, it is just a generic name. Any process which you are seeing in the next numerical now, any process can be an heat engine. This is a generic word of explaining the concept. Okay, so don't go by the word engine. When I say here heat engine, in your mind I know you get 2-stroke, 4-stroke petrol diesel engines. Okay, that is because of the common keyword engine. Human body is a heat engine, remember it. It's not a 2-stroke or 4-stroke diesel engine, it's a heat engine. That's what we are going to see in the next numerical. So the concept of thermodynamics is about engine, not since the engine, diesel engine or a petrol engine, they are originated from these concepts. That's how the name of engine comes into picture there. Okay. Fine. So the 57% is the maximum limit. What if? Imagine this. I'll give the same statement. I'll not say what if maximum efficiency. I will say, instead of last sentence, I'll put a question, extra question here, that I have constructed an engine and I claim that my engine has an efficiency of 75%. Is it possible? That's my question. Okay. So if somebody claims that they have an engine working between the same reservoir with an efficiency more than this value, decimal values you will just neglect it, because your 700, 300, when you do it, it may be 3-4 decimal. When you take it, it may be. Okay, so 1 decimal, fine. Okay. So if somebody says that 60%, yeah, that's more than this, not possible. Right? So this is the maximum possible value. Beyond this, it is impossible. This is what I was telling you in the beginning, that when you design an engine or a process, the thermodynamics tells you the upper limit beyond which you cannot work, right? Beyond which you cannot improvise your system. Okay. Now let me go ahead with another problem. A new engine is claimed to be having a power output of 2 HP, that means work done, while receiving a heat input of 3 kilowatt. That is Q1. Input is Q1, output is W. And working between the source and sink temperature limits. Source means HTR, sink means LTR. Limits of 600 Kelvin and 450 Kelvin. Determine the efficiency of the proposed engine. Is the claim for the engine admissible? Whatever I have told you, just previous modified question I asked you, asked in a different style here. Okay, let me break the problem for you. I have one heat engine. HTR of that is 600 Kelvin, here hot body. LTR is 450 Kelvin. Okay, the Q1 input is 3 kilowatt, output is 2 HP. Okay, so it is that a new engine. I have designed a new engine. I claim means if I give this much energy, this will give me the 2 HP power. That's what I claim. Okay, I give 3000 watt, it gives me 2 HP power output. I have claimed. I am saying that it's possible in my case. You will ask what is the temperature reservoirs, high temperature and low temperature. I'll say that it's 600 Kelvin and 450 Kelvin. Now you make a judgment whether what I am telling you is correct or wrong. How do we do this? First, you find out the engine efficiency based on the available information. That is, I have told you the input, I have told you the output, right? So I have told you the engine efficiency. Means I may be having a reversible or irreversible, whatever it is, input and output of that is known to me, right? So I know the W, I know the Q1. Work is 2 HP and input is 3 kilowatt. I'll convert it so that I have the same unit for both. 1 HP is 745.7 watt, kilowatt means 1000 watt, right? I'll compare it in the same unit. So I get a value of 49.7% of the efficiency of proposed engine. This is the first thing. Alright. So this is what I have done for my engine. Remember, my engine may be Carnot's engine, may not be Carnot's engine. I do not know. So for that reason, if I do not know whether it is Carnot engine or not, I should use this equation W by Q1 or Q1 minus Q2 by Q1. I cannot use T1 minus T2 by T1 unless I know that it's Carnot engine. If you say that it is Carnot engine, then only you have to use T1 minus T2 by T1. Otherwise, no, cannot use that. Okay. What if it is a Carnot engine? This is what if it's a general engine. I do not know anything based on the given information. Now the next thing is, what if this particular thing is a Carnot engine? Means between the HDR and LTR it is working 600 and 450 Kelvin. So I'll compare it. I get 25%. So I know now, according to the first law of Carnot cycle, Carnot principle, first Carnot principle, according to that, no engine cannot have, no engine can have an efficiency greater than Carnot engine efficiency. Right? So what should I write now? Maximum efficiency of an engine cannot be greater than Carnot's efficiency. This is Carnot first principle. The claim is not admissible as proposed engine, this one, have an efficiency greater than Carnot's efficiency, right? This is almost 50, this is 25. So maximum possible is 25, you cannot go beyond 25. But you're saying that it is 50 almost. So the claim is not correct. So there's possibly there may be some error in doing the evaluation analysis. Some analysis error may be there, I don't know, or he is making a fake claim. In any case, this particular claim is not admissible, it's not correct. That's what this says. Right? Yeah, I have some 2, 3, 4 problems, around 4 problems are here. I'll just give you the idea. No solution I've given you. Okay. Solution will be there, is there in the solved problems. I uploaded the solved solutions. In that you get the solutions of this. I'll just give you the idea. I'll read it and I'll give you the idea how to solve this. Very simple problems. The way you have solved earlier. Okay. From a reservoir at 327 degrees Celsius. Remember, please, degree Celsius, you have to convert it to Kelvin before you use it. 1000 joule of heat is transferred to an engine that operates on the Carnot cycle. The engine rejects heat to the reservoir at 27 degrees Celsius. Means I have 327 degrees Celsius HDR, 27 degrees Celsius LTR. Input is 1000 joule. Q1 is 1000 joule. Determine the thermal efficiency of the cycle. Somewhere it is mentioned Carnot cycle. So let me take it as Carnot engine. Given the Carnot engine, I can calculate the efficiency. Temperature 1, temperature 2, T1 minus T2 by T1. Please note, you have to convert in Kelvin. T1 and T2 should be in Kelvin here, absolute values. Denominator is absolute value. Numerator there may be difference, but denominator is absolute value. Okay? So otherwise you'll go wrong there. So determine the thermal efficiency of the cycle. You get eta. And the maximum work done. The next question. How do you calculate maximum work done? W by Q1. This maximum work, W divided by Q1 should be equal to the efficiency what you get here. When you calculate, please note the value should be in decimal here. Right? W by Q1 is equal to eta, this equation. When you calculate W, the Q1 is 1000 in that solution. Eta should be in decimal value. Don't take the percentage value, take the decimal value, right? So that's what you have to solve. Okay, here's another problem. If a human consumes 120 kilojoule of energy in the form of food, this is the input. What is the maximum possible work that can be done? Okay, so we need some information. The average human body temperature is 37 degrees Celsius and atmospheric temperature is 25 degrees Celsius. State the assumptions made. So what do you understand from this? 37 degrees Celsius and 25 degrees Celsius. HDR, LTR. Alright, HDR and LTR is given. Now, maximum possible work. This word, when you come across, remember, we are talking about Carnot engine. If it is a Carnot engine, you get maximum work. If it is not a Carnot engine, you will get a work lesser than maximum possible work. you get lower amount of energy. Mean efficiency is less, right? That's why. So I'm using a Carnot engine. Human body is a Carnot engine. Using the temperature, again I'm repeating this, convert it to Kelvin. So temperature 1 minus temperature 2 divided by temperature 2. You get the efficiency of human body, assuming it to be Carnot engine. That is my assumption. I'm assuming human body as Carnot engine. That's my assumption. Alright. So I get eta, efficiency of Carnot engine, I get it. Input is 120 kilojoule. Work done, calculate. W by Q1 is equal to eta. So you can calculate W. How much maximum work you can do, that you can calculate, right? An extended version of problem I have it here in the 25. Before that 24, it's very similar to earlier problems. Just to give a precursor to this problem is given. The steam supplied to an engine liberates 6000 kilojoule of heat. What does it mean? Steam supplied to an engine liberates 6000 kilojoule of heat. If that is the amount of energy input to the engine, okay? 6000 kilojoule is the Q1. If the engine efficiency is 40%, eta is 0.4. Can you calculate W? W by Q1 is equal to 0.4, right? W by Q1 is equal to 0.4. You get W, work done. Now, next question. To what height a mass of 10 kg can be lifted using the work output of this engine? You know the work now. W is equal to mgh, mass into gravity into height. Mass is given to you, gravity you know, acceleration due to gravity 9.81, and h is the question you have to find out. Okay, so that's how you can solve it. Very similar to this, you have another problem. A human being can perform work at 80% of thermodynamic efficiency. Eta is 0.8. A person weighing 50 kg, mass is given, consumes food and climbs staircase 5-meter height. H is given. Calculate the minimum quantity of food to be consumed if calorific value of food is 250 kilojoule per kg. The human body temperature is 37 degrees Celsius, atmospheric temperature is 27 degrees Celsius. Okay, so what it means here, you need to be very careful here because of this 80% explanation here. It can perform at 80% of thermodynamic efficiency. What is this thermodynamic efficiency? It is the Carnot efficiency. 80% of Carnot efficiency. But what is Carnot efficiency? Calculate based on 37 and 27. T1 minus T2 divided by T1. That gives you the thermodynamic efficiency or Carnot efficiency. The actual efficiency of human being is, it is not mean in general, in simple way, I should say this human being is not a Carnot engine. It's a irreversible engine. In this case, okay, in this case, human being is an irreversible engine, not a Carnot engine. Okay, since it is irreversible engine, efficiency should be lower than the Carnot engine. So the Carnot engine is working at an, if it was a Carnot engine, it would have an efficiency of T1 minus T2 by T2 in Kelvin. Okay, so that's the efficiency. Now this human being has an efficiency 80% of that efficiency, 0.8 into this efficiency. Is that clear? Now you calculate the rest. What do we have to calculate? So the efficiency is 80% of this. I do not know the exact number. Hypothetically, just for your understanding, let me say the actual efficiency is 0.6. I do not know the value. Don't take it forward as it is. 0.6 is the efficiency. Let me make an assumption. So the work to be done is 50 kg, mass into gravity into height. Work done should be 50 into gravity, 9.81 into 5 meter. That is the work done. Divided by Q1. Okay, Q1 you have to find out. Given the efficiency. Efficiency is 0.6. Let me say, I'm not sure about the value. Let me say 0.6 the efficiency. Find out Q1. Right, in this question, first you have to find out Q1. What is that Q1? Total quantity of heat should be supplied to the human being. But from where the heat comes? The heat comes from the food. But food, if you eat 1 kg of food, it gives you 250 kilojoule of energy. But for this, you require Q1 amount of energy, right? So for that, how much kg of food you should eat? For 1 kg, it releases 250 kilojoule. For this much amount of Q1 amount of energy, how much food you have to eat? Please note, this is in kilojoule. Here what you get here, kg mass into gravity into height. Kg into meter per second square into meter gives you joule. Very important. It gives you, W gives you in joule. When you convert it, Q1 is again in the joule, but here it is in kilojoule per kg. So be careful with the unit conversion of that kilo, right? Yeah, that's the solution. That's the way you have to solve the problem. Okay. Now coming to the last topic. Quickly, one more slide I have, then it's done. So third law of thermodynamics. When you come to the third law, before I go to the third law of thermodynamics, I will ask a question. This is the precursor or the way you can define third law of thermodynamics. As the randomness increases, entropy of the system also increases. Because entropy is a measure of randomness, more the randomness of the system, more the entropy it is. This is in the forward direction, right? Let us go in the backward direction, reverse direction. Is it possible that at some ordered state, absolute entropy is zero? Is it possible? Is it possible that the absolute entropy is zero somewhere? That's the question. And based on that, the third law of thermodynamics is built. So the third law of thermodynamics says the absolute entropy is zero for the perfect crystalline substance at absolute zero. This also I can write capital. At absolute zero temperature, that point of time, at that point of temperature, the entropy of any crystalline substance is zero. There is no randomized or you know about FCC crystal structures, right? So they are absolutely perfect. There is no disorderedness in that. At that point, the entropy is zero. Let me take that case, 0 Kelvin, let me take, it is in the solid form there. Let me increase the temperature. As I increase the temperature, it starts melting at the melting point. We call it as the freezing point, right? So at the melting point of the freezing point, at that particular temperature, it melts into the liquid form. Further, I will increase the temperature. It will go reach a point called as boiling point, then it will evaporate. Still, I will increase the temperature further. It is forming a vapor or the gas, the temperature of which increases. Okay. Now, the entropy here it is zero. At any point, can I calculate the entropy based on this? That is what the equation tells now. Remember, where Q is equal to delta H, because it is all isobaric process, Q is equal to delta H, and ds, we can write it as dq by t. For a reversible process, ds is equal to dq by t or delta H by t, in other words. Delta H by t we can write. Now, to increase this temperature, we know this Cp dt. Remember, we have done the problem. Cp dt by t. Cp dt is for delta H. Delta H, heat of freezing divided by that particular temperature. And here, when you increase the temperature for the liquid, again Cp dt by t. This is the heat of vaporization by T. Further, we are increasing Cp delta T, that is delta H. Delta H, all delta H terms, right? Delta H for increasing the temperature here, delta H for phase transition, delta H for increasing the temperature, delta H for the phase transition. Again, you are increasing the delta up to certain temperature, right? That is T. So, this is the way we can calculate the absolute entropy starting from 0 Kelvin. It is possible to calculate entropy. Overall, what it says is all the main three laws of thermodynamics other than zero. First law says you cannot create the energy. You cannot create the energy. You can transform one form to the another form. Second law says you can transform, but only in positive direction, only in one direction where entropy is increasing. Entropy should increase. That's in the forward direction. Now the third law says you cannot have an entropy unless it is a 0 Kelvin. You cannot have an entropy 0. Absolute means there is no ordered system. You cannot have an entropy 0 unless it's an absolute 0 temperature. In reality, we are unable to reach that temperature. Okay, so that is the point, overall point of view. If you are able to reach this particular temperature, we may be able to reverse the process. Okay, we may be able to reverse the certain process under controlled conditions. That's very important, controlled condition, not as it is. That's the beauty of three different laws of thermodynamics. One holds as the advantage over the second one. In first has some problem, the second one solves it. Second has a problem, third one solves it. And we do not have the fourth law of thermodynamics. We have only third law of thermodynamics, totally four. Zeroth law is the base setter for temperature. It doesn't explain you the concepts of energy and transfers, right? So this is the keyword. The keyword takeaway from all laws of thermodynamics, very important one. Listen to me, just one sentence. Energy of the system, energy of the universe remains constant, whereas entropy increases. I'll repeat, energy of the universe remains constant, it doesn't change, whereas the entropy of the universe is ever increasing. Entropy goes on increasing, means universe is getting more and more disordered state. That's why you cannot go back in the time. Okay, it goes disordered state continuously, right? Yeah. Fine. Here is a certain thing that I need to tell you. There are 4 questions I'm giving you as assignment for assignment 4B. I'm just extending one more day. You are supposed to do it yesterday. I gave you this time. So submit it by 7th of December. That is next Monday. Okay. 4 questions which may end up with maybe 2 pages or 3 pages, not more than that. So write Kelvin Planck and Cauchy statement of second of thermodynamics. Prove their equivalence. Refer K.V.Narayanan thermodynamics for this. Do not refer my class notes. Okay. Refer K.V.Narayanan thermodynamics. Explain Carnot cycle with a neat sketch and draw PV diagram and TS diagram. For the diagram, you can refer the class PDF. For the explanation, refer the K.V.Narayanan book. These two are very important topics. Then write Carnot's principle and explain their significance. Refer K.V.Narayanan again. I have uploaded a book, K.V.Narayanan Thermodynamics 2, for part 2. Okay, it's under the books and syllabus section. Refer that. So 3 questions are from K.V.Narayanan. Explanation is already there. You have to make a notes point-wise. So write in points. Read it and write in points. Then the problem number 25. What is the problem number 25? This one. This problem I want you to solve. Solve this problem as a problem for the assignment. Then, one second, yeah. In Moodle, I have already uploaded a video lecture from YouTube, not mine, on steam, different types and properties. There is one class notes also within the same page. Watch the video. On this separate class, I will not be taking. Okay, I will not be taking a separate class on this this topic. It is beautifully explained in that particular YouTube video of about 10 or 12 minutes. Neatly explained what are the different, what is steam, what are the properties, and how to use it from the steam table. 2 different types of steam table. Okay, so all of you have to watch the video. Please note that in Moodle, I can view who has viewed, for how much time, what you have viewed, all the logs are recorded. Okay, I'll consider that as the attendance for your case. Okay, yeah, that's the end of unit number 4 and this class. All right, yeah, I hope nobody has